Hello friends, and welcome once again to the Gesundheit Kitchen, outside edition once again. We are with my dear friend Dr. Ellen Steinberg, so thanks for meeting us in Random Park again, as we like to do. It's an excuse, right, for us to hang out. So I wanted to talk today about lactose intolerance, because I feel like not only am I the father of 3 children who happen to be lactose intolerant, but as a gastrectomy patient, and as somebody who speaks with lots of gastrectomy patients, seems to be a kind of a common theme. So I want to talk about lactose in general, like what it is and why we should kind of be mindful of it.
Sure, and let me start by saying, yes, it is more common, but it is not a guarantee. So if someone does have a gastrectomy and they're expecting to be lactose intolerant, that isn't always the case.
Good point, good point.
But it does happen. And basically all it is lactose is a disaccharide, meaning 2 sugars.
Okay.
One is glucose, the other galactose. What happens when you're lactose intolerant is that you are unable, you don't produce enough lactase to separate those.
So lactase, just to get our terms straight, is different in that that's the enzyme, right?
The enzyme needed to break that
Okay,
bond,
got
correct. And as you get older, or whether or not you have stomach cancer or anything else, just any healthy individual, as we get older, that does tend to decline.
Got it.
But basically, so what happens is when you can't break that bond, it'll eventually enter into your large intestines as a disaccharide, as opposed to, monosaccharides is what you would want, but they're together. So as that starts to basically ferment,
right,
that's where all that gas comes from, stomach upset, diarrhea.
Sure.
So it's more of an inability to just separate 2 sugars.
So at that point, it's like a structural thing, and with all of the healthy yeast and their healthy fungi in your back, there's more than just bacteria in your gut.
Oh, yeah.
And if they find something that's a little uncommon or unusual or whatever, like you said, it can encourage sort of the growth of, I don't want to say bad bacteria or bad yeast, but it can feed yeast that can cause that discomfort. And
right, and it is sort of it isn't sort of, it is a fermenting sort of fermentation in your large intestines.
Gotcha.
So, as you know, that does produce
exactly.
gas.
There's some power behind that at times. Well, so you mentioned that our ability to handle lactose sort of, weans, and I'm using that term especially because we're the only mammals, or really the only animals that I know of, that consume milk beyond those sort of weaning years, right? I mean, so as we get older, we stop consuming milk. I should say, as an animal, that's the typical kind of path of things. Like for any other mammal you can think of, they're not in their adult years consuming that milk.
Exactly, and all, again, lactose, all animals, all mammals, I should say, there is lactose in the milk. So, whether or not some people like to experiment maybe with a goat milk or a llama milk or something else, yes, there is maybe less in those different animals, but there will still be lactose in that milk.
And that's a great point. So as you mentioned, not everyone who's had a partial or a total gastrectomy is sensitive, and I've met people that I'm quite honestly a little jealous of because they have no problems.
No problem.
But some of the folks that have had sensitivity have not had problems with goat's milk, and from my understanding, the shape of the fat molecule in camel's milk most closely resembles human's milk. So, but finding camel's milk or a willing camel friend might be a bit of a challenge. When I was in the Chicago area, I was in a Middle Eastern grocery store, and it was also expensive. It was like $40 for a half gallon of fresh camel's milk. So anyway, there's some logistical issues around trying to find that.
Camel milk may not be the best, but
exactly.
You are correct.
You have some humps to get over to get to the camel's milk. Sorry. Anyway, we had too much fun. So but the thought. So you mentioned breaking that down. Now, when it comes to cultured dairy products, so I was having my traditional glass of kefir, which is that sort of yogurt-based drink, which helps me with my digestion, and it says on there lactose-free. But it's a little confusing because it says made with full fat milk, but it is lactose-free. So what's happening there?
So what's happened in I don't know the exact chemical process by which is, but basically those probiotics, the fermentation process, it's sort of pre-digesting it for you.
Yeah.
So yes, it is lactose-free, and that has already been separated, so to speak,
for you. I think we talked about cultured foods at another park at another time, but the idea of sort of outsourcing our digestion, right? I mean, so those bacteria are doing the heavy lifting for us. They're doing what, structurally we might not be able to do ourselves because things have been removed or redacted or, or rearranged. So the idea of having those bacteria, even when it comes to, for me, sourdough bread is easier to digest because the bacteria has already broken down some of those complicated starches and whatnot. So not to go off on a tangent, but the same thing in yogurt or in some hard cheeses, in things like that, you've got the bacteria taking care of possibly breaking those disaccharides, is that what you call it?
Yes.
So it's easier for us then to.
And when they do process those things, they do add things such as lactic acid, and that's what's sort of the it sort of is helping break it apart. And then in bacteria, it's lactobacilli.
Right.
So sometimes when you're looking at a yogurt product, it will say lactobacilli.
Right.
And so that is why it could be a lactose-free product, only because it's already been separated, quote, for
Got
you.
it. Yeah. Well, and the other example that just came to mind is ghee, and ghee is that sort of refined butter that I use, and I've used on many of the episodes in the kitchen, and that you still get the flavor of the butter, but it's being that it's lactose-free, at least it's easier on the system for digestion.
Well, and the thing is so many of these products, they remove the whey part, and that's where most of the lactose is. So by taking out the whey, they leave the casein. So that's, one way that they can also decrease or eliminate some of the lactose.
I like how you said that's one way
that
they can decrease. You're just on to those puns. You don't even know. You don't even know you're making the pun. That's why I'm here, to point out your puns.
Point out my puns.
Well, with all of the, I don't want to say distress, but I think there's no other word, post-surgery, there's a lot of distress, right? Your body's sort of having to relearn and adapt to a new way of eating. So any of the foods that are trouble foods that we can either eliminate or reduce, or at least be mindful of the fact, because I feel like, if you love having a nice cold glass of milk, and that's been part of your life forever, when we have to give something up, it's always a challenge. Like mentally, you think, well, now I can't eat, this, or So I feel like if you can find alternates that are still within that, umbrella, and luckily we live in an age where we do have alternates.
Oh, so many choices. Yeah. It's really a great time to be able to find. I'm not lactose intolerant, but my favorite is soy milk.
Yeah.
I like oat milk. I just find they have more of a creamy flavor, texture. I enjoy them.
No, me too. And as a coffee drinker, I'm an oat milk guy for that reason. It holds up well to the heat. And then even when I'm cooking, I try to use cultured sour cream if I'm trying to add that, because again it's got the cultures in there.
Yes.
Or I use kefir. But there are also plant-based butters. There are plant-based milks or even cream that work well in those high temp situations. So I think even going back, 10 years ago, trying to find a suitable dairy alternate was not an easy task.
Right, and if people still want the taste of milk or to have true milk, then there are the products like Lactaid milk, where, there isn't the lactose in it, but it is cow's milk.
Got it.
So
yeah, and so it tastes like it is because it is cow's milk. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, again, it's, having been a survivor now for many years, to me, sometimes it is inspiring to see that the industry is moving with the trend of kind of moving away from animal products.
Right.
And there's a whole host of kind of ethical, sociological, environmental issues with that as well. And not that we need to dive into that, but the fact that the world is paying attention to some alternates, we can kind of ride that wave towards a healthier diet.
You can, and with good choices too, that they're not. It used to be that some of the choices that the industries would produce were not always all that healthy.
That's a great point.
But now they really do pay attention to that, and there's no reason you should not be able to find a good milk substitute that is very healthy for you.
I'm smiling because I remember the first time I was somewhere and I asked for cream for my coffee, and they said, well, we have this powder, and if you look at the powder, it's number one, milk was never ever even in the same zip code as the stuff, and number two, it's not called creamer; it's called coffee lightener. So it's the point of it is to make your coffee look lighter than it did before you put the stuff in there. So you're right.
And it's just oil and sugar.
Yeah.
So don't be fooled. And those of you who like the artificial creamers, if it says, those, I can't name names.
No, don't name. Let's not.
But some of the artificial creamers for coffee, be sure to read those ingredients. Some of them have no dairy whatsoever. It is literally oil and sugar.
And sugar is probably the only ingredient that resembles something that was ever food, right? Because most of them you need a PhD in chemistry to even understand, like, what am I? And I get it. They're trying to replicate that sort of mouthfeel, the fat, the whitening, lightening thing, but it is nothing like a plant-based alternative, which again is the fewer the ingredients on anything, I think the better. So we could talk about this stuff all day long. I think that probably got us covered for lactose. Thank you again for.
It was my pleasure.
And why do I feel like I want a nice oat milk latte right about now?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks, Ellen.
You bet.
Thank you guys. Take care of yourselves. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.